Hey guys, it's Bad Snacks here, and I have Bean with me, which means that I am home. I am home from tour. I've been home for about a week now, and I tried vlogging from the road, but it got a little bit busy, so ended up not really being able to do that. But anyway, I've been here for about a week. I'm actually in my new apartment. I'm in a new space. This is like the 7th iteration of studio in the last year, it feels like. But anyway, we are here. And so today I just wanted to make a little recap video talking about my experience from the rest of tour and also talking about some of the pros and cons of touring, at least in my experience. So let's just get right into it. Okay, I'm gonna let you go nap. Home is where the puppy is. So yeah, for those of you who don't know, I was just on tour with Anomalie for about 3.5, 4-ish weeks, and we hit 18 dates across the country, and it was a wild experience. I talked about the prep in one video. I also talked about what our daily schedule looks like in my previous tour vlog. So today I'm just going to be reflecting on some of the experiences, some of my observations, some of the pros and the cons, because there are a lot of both. So the first thing I want to talk about is that the best comparison that I have for tour, if you haven't toured before, is that touring, at least for this kind of time frame, feels a lot like summer camp. It feels like sleepaway camp, and I say that because there's kind of this element of resistance at first of like, I think a lot of us have been in that situation where, you know, you're being sent to your first sleepaway camp or even your first sleepover, and you're kind of like, no, I don't want to go, I'm so comfy, I'm so cozy, and it can be really hard, you get a little emotional, and then you hit kind of like a breaking point, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my god, this is so amazing, this is so fun, I never want it to end, and then by the time it does end, it's so bittersweet, and everybody's crying and, you know, all that good stuff. It's not very often, at least for me, that I'm surrounded by musicians and people in the industry that are around my age that consistently, like, you know, literally like a daily slumber party, and we're all working towards the same thing and we have these objectives and these goals. It's a very unique experience, actually. It's kind of funny because it really did follow that trajectory, that kind of like arc of feeling a little bit overwhelmed. Like the first week of tour was cool, but it was a lot of adjusting, and I think because it was so fast paced, I just didn't even have a moment to like catch my breath. And then week 2 happened, and I hit a little bit of a breaking point where I was like, oh my god, what did I just sign myself up for? And I was exhausted, and my sleep schedule had completely readjusted, and you know, I'm in the middle of the country, and you know, I'm not gonna see my friends or family for a little bit of time, and I'm with this crew that I'm still just getting to know, and so it did feel a little bit overwhelming just for that brief period of time. But then after that, it was like, wait a second, this is pretty fun. Okay. We're gonna pretend that it's Friday instead of Monday. I think it's worth noting that that experience is different for everybody. Like, for me, I feel like I'm a fairly down the middle introvert extrovert, and I know that there are other people that are kind of on other sides of the spectrum. So it's like, if you're super extroverted, it's going to be a slightly easier adjustment for you, and if you're super introverted, it can be a little bit of a challenge, especially if you don't know the people that you're touring with particularly well. So it is different for everybody. But yeah, I would say overall this summer camp was very fun. The other observation that I had is very similar, which is that it really feels like it's completely just this inertia, this momentum that you have to build, that once you kind of start getting into the flow of things, it makes sense to me why musicians do this for months on end, because the amount of prep that goes into it and the amount of time that it takes just to kind of feel the rhythm of the events and do your kind of dance of like, okay, this is how we set up, this is how we configure things, this is where we do sound check, this is when we eat, this is when we nap. Like getting used to that schedule, and then once you start doing that over and over again, it makes more sense to do it more often, I guess. I think that if we were doing a tour that was any less than 3 weeks, it would kind of just feel like one foot in the door, one foot out the door, of like getting a taste of tour, but also still knowing that we're gonna be home pretty soon. And I feel like it just takes a little bit of time to really get that schedule down and to really feel the momentum, everything, and to kind of put parts of these schedules on autopilot so that it's not as draining. and it doesn't take up so much brain space, I guess. Alongside the momentum and inertia, that also comes from adjusting to the sleep schedule or lack thereof. The way that I described it to my friends was that it kind of felt like we were microdosing sleep. We did have the luxury of being able to sleep on the bus while the bus was driving to the next city. That's the benefit of having a bandwagon. It's why it's probably really worth the money, as opposed to leaving the gig, going to the hotel at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and then having to wake up at 6 or 7 to drive all day the next day. So this was definitely the better solution. The only thing is that maybe it's because I had a bottom bunk, but the quality of sleep was not fantastic because you can feel all of the construction. You can feel when the bandwagon is turning, you can feel when there's rain. Like, I'm a very light sleeper in general, so, you know, definitely did get sleep, but it wasn't like the most amazing quality of sleep. And so in that sense, we're also taking kind of like small naps throughout the day, and that just becomes your sleep schedule. And again, with the inertia momentum thing, it's like once you get used to it, your body actually adapts pretty well. But it's definitely an adjustment. And on that note too, I did have a couple discussions with a few different people about this, and we all kind of agreed that being on tour in this kind of weird way feels a little bit like survival mode. And that sounds really extreme, but in a sense, it is kind of this process of like waking up in a foreign place, trying to get your bearings, trying to understand where you are, where is your safe place, where can you nap, where can you get food, where can you use the bathroom or take a shower. There are all of these questions that you kind of have to figure out on a daily basis. And yeah, even though we have all of these creature comforts and stuff like that, I think there is this kind of subconscious level of unfamiliarity. So just like you're microdosing sleep, it kind of feels like you're microdosing cortisol as well, like that, you know, just the right amount of stress to keep you functioning. And that's why a lot of people get sick right after tours, that once you can like relax in your home environment, that's when your immune system is just like, okay, we're done. It happens a lot. So in terms of other observations, just aside from the pace and kind of the emotional, physical demands of touring in general, one thing that was a really big learning experience for me on this was just like the financials of it. And for me, again, I was the opening act. I was not the headliner. So Anomalie was financing a lot of these big overhead costs, and I was keeping my overhead costs fairly minimal because it was just a solo act and I got to ride on the bus with them, which was good time. But even still, one of the things that blew my mind was how many venues across the country take merch cuts. Somebody had asked in my last video why merch was priced so high on tour as opposed to what maybe the normal market price would be. And it's because the margins are so slim in general. So I'll try to break this down for you. When you are an independent / middle class musician, like I consider myself to be, we're not ordering merch in the kind of bulk that would get you bulk prices, that would get you the lowest cost per item. So what that means is that we're not ordering 10,000 t-shirts and getting them for a cost of $3 per t-shirt. We're usually getting much lower quantities. So for me, I only ordered like a couple hundred. So in general, you have to do the recoup cost, and then the margins that you're dealing with are maybe like $12 per shirt or something like that. It really depends on the shirt, depends on the design. So the margins that we're working with in general aren't super high to begin with. And then on top of that, a lot of these venues are taking upwards of 20%, sometimes even 30% cuts of your merch, and they don't care about the recoup cost. So they're taking 20 to 30% of the cost that you're actually selling the t-shirt for. So at the end of the day, sometimes you're walking away with only like $5 to $7 per t-shirt, which when you look at it in the giant scheme of things, that's really not that much money. And considering that almost all of the money that you make from the actual ticket sales is going to your overhead expenses or whatever expenses it took for you to get on tour in the first place. Like, for example, for me, I split off from the bandwagon in that last week so that I could have a merch person with me, and we had to get a hotel, and then we also had to pay for gas, and then I had to fly back from Phoenix to Boston. And just those costs alone, it's most of what I'm making at these gigs. So I have no idea what Anomalie's financials are, but I know that they're fairly similar, that when you look at the ticket prices and considering that he has a band to pay and he has a bandwagon to pay for and also all of the hotels that we got for the days that we weren't driving, that stuff adds up. So it's really just down to merch. And then when a venue takes a merch cut, it can feel kind of defeating because it's really kind of like a last attempt at breaking even. And what's crazy is that a lot of the venues, they don't even offer a merch person or a seller. Like, that's a separate cost entirely. So I had one merch person on the tour that I hired from the venue, and that was a flat fee of $100. And sometimes they're $100, sometimes they're $200, sometimes they're even more. And they're not provided by the venue. So I don't know entirely why it makes sense for venues to take cuts. I would love to hear the arguments that they have for taking cuts when the margins are already so slim. But yeah, it was just something that I didn't know before I hit the road, and it was a little bit shocking to find out. Speaking of merch, I just wanted to give a huge shout out to one of my best friends on the planet, Michaela, who also goes by Modern Lover and is an amazing producer in her own right. And she came up for the last couple dates of tour on the West Coast and ran merch for me. And that was so helpful because, yeah, aside from the one date where I had a merch seller, I was slinging my own merch. It's fine, we figured it out, and I so appreciate everybody who supported me at the merch booth. We sold out of hot sauce so fast, and also we had to do another order of the black cassette t-shirts, and those will be on sale on my website soon. So if you weren't able to get one in your size on tour, you should be able to get them online very soon. I will keep you posted. At the end of the day, when I ask myself, is touring worth it? Was this tour worth it? From a financial perspective, it's definitely not the most sound use of time in a lot of ways. And a lot of the conversations that I have had with people who work in the music industry is that, yeah, touring is now a marketing expense. That's the reality of touring, which is still kind of crazy to me, but it just is what it is. So in the meantime, the thing that makes touring worth it is you guys, the people who show up to these shows, because I have always been a live performer. I was a live performer way before I was a producer, and to be able to play my music in front of you guys and to vibe with you guys and dance and all that stuff, and then be able to meet you guys is so profoundly meaningful to me. And in a lot of ways, it made the time just fly by because there's something about having a very acute sense of purpose of like, this is what we're going to do today, and this is what we're going to do tomorrow, and this is what we're going to do for the next 3 weeks. Definitely makes the time fly by, and in a very beautiful way. I think for me it was also very much worth it because it's such an amazing experience to be surrounded by so many highly motivated and honestly highly skilled people. Everybody on Anomalie's crew was just so on their A game. The tour manager is amazing, the lighting director is amazing, the band is obviously amazing, and Monica, their merch girl, is awesome. And to be in that environment for an extended amount of time was just so wonderful. And also, like, yeah, I love traveling. I love being able to see the country. I will say that touring is not the best way to get to know a city all the time because sometimes you're only there for a couple hours and you have to stick around wherever the venue is. But still, you're seeing so much, and it's definitely more than if you were just staying at home all the time. So that being said, those were definitely my biggest takeaways, and I would love to open it up to more questions, and I'll try to respond to them in the comment section below. I'm sure there are a lot of questions that you guys have that I have not answered from this video, but these are just my biggest observations from tour. That being said, I am extremely happy to be home, especially because home is new, so this is a very new chapter for me. And I also have definitely a completely revitalized sense of excitement when it comes to future releases. So my summer is about to be real busy, and I hope I get to show you guys what I've been up to real soon. See you on the road next time.